Hello and welcome to the Action Network Podcast UFC Betting Preview. I'm Sean Zerillo, joined today by Billy Ward to help you break down a 12-fight card for UFC Azerbaijan. We're here to give you our best bets, favorite underdogs, top props, and more. And if you'd like to tail some of the bets that we discuss on today's show, you can find the bets, quick slip links in the podcast and videos description, or go to actionnetwork.com/betnow. UFC's first time in Azerbaijan, 12-fight card from Baku. Starting early, though, 12 p.m. prelims, so make sure to get those bets in on Friday night. 6-fight main card will start at 3 p.m. Eastern. The main event, a light heavyweight bout between Jamal Hill and Khalil Rountree Jr. Hill was around plus 140, plus 130 earlier in the week. Line has come all the way down, though, making this a round of pick'em. Fight is minus 360 to end inside the distance, plus 250 to go to a decision. Billy, I went ahead and told you to write up the main event this week, so I'm going to throw things over to you first to give out the breakdown on the show. Hill is from your area of the world. I feel like you usually have pretty good reads on his fight. It's potential that you may have gotten every single one of his UFC fights correct. I know you bet against him with Pereira, and I think you've been on him virtually every other fight. You were on him against Glover. So give me your read on Hill against Khalil Rountree Jr. I know we're on the same side of this matchup, but where would you bet Hill up to? And then in terms of props or live betting angles, what are you targeting for this fight?
Ironically, I don't remember the most recent one, but I think I might have bet against Yuri or on Hill in this last one, breaking my Jamal Hill streak. But yeah, I'm super glad we switched. There's a lot of interesting dynamics here. It's a lefty on lefty matchup. We have Hill, who's more of a boxer, against Khalil Rountree, who has more of a Muay Thai style. The thing that really stood out to me for Hill, though, with his boxing is that he tends to lunge and get a little bit in front of his front foot when he is reaching to fight taller and longer opponents. Both of his UFC losses that involved striking were against Yuri Prochazka and Alex Pereira. Both of those guys have the same or longer reach than Hill and were able to keep the distance. Khalil Rountree, from a frame and length standpoint, a little bit undersized for 205. I believe he's giving up 3 or 4 inches in reach here.
And height, yeah, both.
3.5. Yeah, so Rountree, what he likes to do is he'll dart in from the distance, try to mix it up in the clinch, and then dart back away. But that is like the exact wrong thing to do against Jamal Hill, who has a really good jab and really good straight left hand from that southpaw stance. I believe Hill will have a lot of opportunities to catch him coming in those exchanges. And the other thing I saw from Rountree that I don't love against a fighter like Hill is he has that Muay Thai style where he likes to have a quick exchange with you and then kind of pull all the way out, take a break, reset, and then do it again, almost like we're taking turns. Where Hill, with the more boxing style, kind of keeps that pressure going and doesn't give you those breaks or those disruptions. That obviously worked against him in the Alex Pereira fight, where he thought he was getting a break from a groin shot, and then Herb Dean just let him keep going. A little bit fluky, but like that's part of just what he does is he keeps that going and he stays close and stays in striking range instead of separating all the way out. And then outside of that, the other factor is Rountree just took so much damage against Alex Pereira in his last fight. And that strikes me as one of those that you see guys never come back from those close title fights. Like, it reminds me of Anthony Smith or Dominic Reyes against John Jones, where they're on these great streaks, and then Jones just hurt him so bad. Even Alexander Gustafsson, to an extent, against John Jones. They were just never the same fighter, despite having close, or in Smith's case, like a weird opportunity to win the belt. It wouldn't shock me if we saw that out of Rountree. Not super old for the division at 35, but, not a young man either. So for all that reason, I took Hill when he was slightly plus money. I didn't get the best of the line. If you missed that, I think the inside the distance of plus 175 is probably the safest. Just, it's a 5-round fight. I actually trust Hill's cardio more than Rountree's. I think he's a little bit smoother. He doesn't work as hard. And as, much as we like to tease Jamal Hill about his physique, he's not this big jacked up dude that burns through all of his oxygen. He looked great in the later rounds against Glover. Some of his other fights, he looked great. Rountree clearly faded against Alex Pereira. And he's just so explosive, he tends to burn himself out. So for a 5-round fight, I think Rountree is going to fade at the end if he doesn't get knocked out before that. So inside the distance, it's close to the knockout prop. Knockout is obviously the most likely. I know you put knockout in there. So I'm kind of debating what I would take if I hadn't got Hill at plus money. Any of those, though, I think are okay. And yeah, you mentioned Jamal Hill is a live angle too, so I think you agree with me on the cardio aspect.
Completely agree on the cardio aspect. In fact, I would even go as far as to say Hill to win in round 4 at 18-1, Hill to win in round 5 at 20-1 are interesting pokes this week. what scares me off of betting those is I think he could finish the fight in round 3. And, even going earlier than that, the potentially compromised shin for Khalil Rountree coming off of the Pereira fight. Just, I think, massive durability edge for Jamal Hill here, and then a massive cardio edge as well. Rountree is going to be dangerous early, and I don't love Hill's defense. Been knocked out technically in consecutive fights. They get finished on the ground in his last fight, but has shown durability concerns, in his recent fights. And just has poor striking defensive tendencies, really bad footwork. So from the early going, in terms of like a pure technical kickboxing match, I do think Rountree is going to have success in the early minutes, potentially win the first round or two. But I think Jamal takes over down the stretch with superior cardio and, more importantly, superior output. Hill lands about 7 significant strikes per minute, absorbs 3.9. Rountree, dead even, lands 3.9, absorbs 3.8. So Hill's outlanding his opponents by 3.1 strikes per minute. Rountree getting outlanded by nearly a strike per minute. I often talk about the combined offensive and defensive striking efficiency numbers. Typically, those add up to 100% for fighters. Championship caliber fighters will be closer to 110. Hill is at 98. Rountree is at 86. Rountree does not land at a high percentage and also does not defend strikes at a particularly high percentage either. So as I said, Hill late props live after round 1, live after round 2 may be the best entry point. Late props to win in round 4, round 5. I make his money line though minus 160, and I make his ITD odds around plus 116. So any iteration of Hill on the money line, Hill inside the distance, I think I'll end up playing both props or playing the money line and the prop along with it, and then looking for a live entry on Hill, as I said, live after round 2. And considering the late props along with it. Billy, do you have a price target that you would bet Hill up to? And I'd imagine we can assume the best live price might come after round 2, but I would be ready to go after round 1 as well. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think to the first part of the question, anything moving beyond the minus 110 that he's at, honestly, if he's not getting plus money or like even money on his pre-fight money line, I think I would just go inside the distance or knockout just because it's overwhelmingly the likeliest. Like, on the one hand, I can see Hill winning a decision due to the striking volume you mentioned. But on the other, these are like 2 guys in their mid-30s coming off knockout losses, both with some significant injuries. I don't see this one hitting the judges, so it almost feels like free money to pivot.
I think it would be Jamal. I think Jamal has to wrestle and top time him for it to go all 25 minutes, which he can do, but I think it's unlikely. But, later rounds, if they're tiring, if Jamal's gotten hurt earlier in the fight, right, doesn't want to keep it at range, he has better cardio. Rountree slowing down a little bit. Maybe he takes him down, holds him down for a round, takes a break on the feet. It's possible, but I think it's only getting there if Jamal does grapple and gets like 10 minutes of control time. So
that's fair. I will say, I put it in this article, the number of takedown attempts between these two in their like 26 UFC fights, 0. Neither of them has ever even attempted a takedown. One other thing I wanted to point out, I meant to get to it earlier. Jamal Hill's back with his original striking coach, Johnny Grigware. He has not been training with Johnny for the last couple of years, partially due to injuries, partially because Jamal was big time and him flying around to Vegas doing celebrity basketball games and whatnot. A lot of clips of Johnny out there training with Jamal, doing some of the unorthodox striking that got him there. I think that is a very big boost to Hill. It's kind of like getting back with Mickey after training at other places, for the Rocky analogy. But to your point about the live, yeah, if you see Hill get to like plus 200 kind of at any point, I think that's probably a good bet. After round 2 could be the peak, but, maybe Hill takes round 1 off and then turns it up in round 2. Final thing, I've thrown too much out here about Jamal Hill, but in his last fight against Yuri, his corner, which did not feature Johnny Grigware, the great striking coach, told him he was down 0-2 in a fight that was 1-1 on all 3 judges' scorecards, and then Hill was extra aggressive in round 3 against Yuri, which is when he got knocked out. So, assuming they don't make that mistake again, hopefully we don't see Hill overextend himself early. And even if they do tell him that in a 5-round fight, he doesn't need to push too hard after 2 rounds. So that helps me feel a little bit better about his money line chances as well.
Let's move on to our fight of the night. A lightweight bout between Rafael Fiziev at about plus 110 and Ignacio Bahamondes at minus 124. Fight is minus 152 to go to a decision, plus 146 to end inside the distance. I think this is a good buy low spot on Fiziev. Favored in both Gaethje fights, minus 225 in the first fight, minus 165 in the rematch. It was minus 130 before he injured his knee against Mateusz Gamrot. -200 in a 5-round fight against RDA. He hasn't been an underdog since he fought Mark Diakese in 2021. On the other hand, Ignacio Bahamondes, he went from -175 to +106 against Manuel Torres. That's how much the market disliked him in that Torres fight. People were betting Jalen Turner pretty aggressively against him in his last matchup. I believe you and me were both on Bahamondes in that fight, Billy. But overall, I do think this is a market overcorrection relative to how they have been bet and how they have been valued previously. That said, the physical aspects of this fight, the cardio dynamic of this fight, certainly favors Bahamondes. He's the much bigger man, 7 inches taller, 4-inch reach advantage. Fiziev has faded generally in the third round of his fights, kind of in the second half of his fights. Now, the second Gaethje fight, his most recent matchup, he did take it coming off of that knee injury on relatively short notice. He didn't have a full camp going into that fight. He was a replacement for Gaethje's originally booked opponent. So I do think more time removed from the injury, a little bit better for Zev. But ultimately, I think Bahamondes could be a spot to live bet after round 1. But pre-fight, I want Fiziev money line, and I want Fiziev to win either inside the distance or by KO. I also like his round 1 KO odds at 10-1 as well. Bahamondes, as I said, has that bigger reach advantage, going to be the more effective striker from distance, but Fiziev in the pocket has the cleaner hands, and I do not trust Bahamondes' striking defense or his head movement from getting clipped in the pocket. I think he's going to get hit, and I think he's going to get hurt early. We'll see if Fiziev is able to put him away, but Fiziev by KO at +410, I make that about +350, and his money line at +110, I make closer to a pick'em price. So anything plus money on that, anything +350 or better on the KO prop. And then Bahamondes live after round 1. I think you can enter and try to arb out a little bit. Billy, I know you don't have as many thoughts on this fight as I do. And, granted, I'm betting into more of the market adjustment than I am into the dynamics of the cardio and the reach and the height in this matchup. So how do you see this one playing out? Any interest on betting it at all? Should be a good one. Exciting matchup between these two. I think somebody ultimately finishes this one. No, I don't think this goes all 15 minutes. What's your read here?
The problem for me, and I have this in every Nacho Bahamondes fight, is he has very, very good submissions, but refuses to grapple proactively. Mm-hmm. Every time he gets his submission game going, it's because somebody else initiated the grappling, and then he made it work. And why that bothers me is because if he just mixed in a takedown every once in a while, even a takedown attempt, it would open up so much for him in the striking game. If he tries to engage in a pure striking match with Rafael, he's not Brazilian, I see it the same way as you, where Fiziev is just so much more technical and is going to outstrike him. But it's an MMA fight, so you'd want Bahamondes to press that advantage a little bit. I just can't trust him to do it at this point because he never does, where it seems like that would be a good opportunity for him, especially with the height dynamics, because when Fiziev gets close, if Bahamondes clinches and then makes him worry about the takedown, it keeps the range. He can use that extended reach to pick him apart. But with that said, I don't see him doing it, so I think the only way I jump in on this one is if I do see Bahamondes even just threaten a takedown early, just to put it in his head. And then, if the live price is similar after round 1 and he's at least shown that he might try to go for a takedown or, a submission from the clinch, whatever, and we can still get a decent price because he lost the striking, that's where I would want to jump in on Bahamondes.
Yeah, Fiziev, pretty good takedown defense, 90% for his career. He actually tripped Gaethje a couple times in their last fight. He has those really nice trips from the clinch. I think he's the better clinch fighter of the pair. So I don't see Bahamondes ultimately having much grappling success. Maybe he could wrap him up with a ninja choke or something with those long limbs, a standing choke just to end the fight in an awkward way. That's what those long limbs are good for when you're in tight. You can wrap them up around necks that normally you wouldn't be able to get all the way around. But yeah, it should be a fun fight. I think somebody finishes that one. I'm going to take Fiziev pre-fight on the inside the distance and the KO lines. I prefer that to his money line. I do think if this goes all 15 minutes, it's likely to be a close and competitive decision. And I think Bahamondes will have the better optics in the second half of round 2 and then in all of round 3. So getting the better optics towards the end of the rounds often tends to help fighters. And I think that is why Fiziev has dropped a number of close decisions, including that first Gaethje decision. It seemed like he was winning round 2, but the final 2 minutes, final 90 seconds of that round kind of swung against him ultimately. Let's look to our favorite underdogs, though, on Saturday's card. Got 3 fights that we want to talk about here, and then another underdog I will give out in the best bet section as well. Start with the heavyweight bout between Curtis Blades, who's minus 250, against Rizvan Kuniev at plus 220. Fight is plus 125 to go to a decision, minus 155 to end inside the distance. And I like the ITD line. I make that closer to minus 220. But Kuniev has never been finished. And I do view him as the more value side of that ITD prop. And I like his ITD prop at about plus 300. I make that plus 220. Blades coming off of another knockout loss against Tom Aspinall just seems not like his chin is shot, but he's very skittish on the feet at this point. And it's almost like a somebody else having the yips in a different sport where, you know, the fight he had against Jairzinho Rosenstrike, Blades is shooting for takedowns with his eyes closed. Like Jairzinho's swinging at him in the pocket, and he's literally like closing his eyes and like hoping he doesn't get hit as he's entering into exchanges. He's the better kickboxer here, probably, but he's so skittish on the feet now. I don't know if he wants the strike, and it may affect his ability to get takedowns. And if he doesn't get takedowns against Kuniev, who is a former Sambo guy, his one fight's via offensive grappling, Kuniev is able to keep this on the feet. I think this is likely close and competitive, and Kuniev may be the more durable of the two fighters. So give me Kuniev plus 220. I forgot where I projected his money line at, but there was plenty of value here. I make this closer, I think, to plus 160. So anything 2-1 or better on Rizvan Kuniev, and then his inside the distance odds as well at 3-1. His KO prop could be alternative too. But as I said, Blade's probably the better striker, 4-inch reach advantage, but give me the guy with more durability who I think can actually defend takedowns and keep this one standing. But you know, Enz ITD minus 155 I think is a solid price as well. I make that closer to minus 220. So might bet the under and Kuniev, might bet Kuniev ITD. We'll see how I go about organizing that one out. But I do like this heavyweight bout to finish, which I do not normally say about Curtis Blades fights. Do you have any read on this one, Billy, and any bet you're considering making?
Yeah, I'm just still a little bit scared about Kuniev because he tested positive for all the steroids against Renan Ferreira. Like, go check it out on Statology. They list like 5 of them. And then, sure, he came back on the Contender Series, but he beat a guy who's like really just a jiu-jitsu dude who was kind of trying MMA, I would almost say, who's like lost a couple since then. So I don't know how to feel about him. Obviously, we are in the post-USADA era, so it might not matter. If we assume the Kuniev that we've seen at his best will be the one who shows up, regardless of what that means in terms of his supplement routine, then I'm totally with you on it.
Yeah, Dagestani grappler, as you said, has a win over Renan Ferreira in PFL and never been finished. So a lot going to his side of the money line there against the guy who's been knocked out 5 times and is coming off of a knockout loss. And speaking of knockouts, Seung-Young Ko, whose nickname is also Ko or KO, I'm not really sure, but the Korean Tyson, Seung-Young Ko, he's plus 370 this week against Oban Elliott. Elliott is north of minus 500. Ko won as a plus 240 underdog in Contender Series. 6 of his 11 wins have come by knockout, but he also has 2 knockout losses of his own. Elliott seemingly has the top time, the grappling upside here. I made Ko's money line plus 333 though, so convince me to fire on Korean Tyson for Saturday, Billy.
So I'm really glad you mentioned the top time in the wrestling for Oban Elliott. His game has taken a huge step forward as he started to wrestle more aggressively. Like if you watch some of his earlier tape, he was kind of just brawling with people, and it went mostly fine for him, but, you know, lower level opposition. The Korean Tyson, Seung-Young Ko, or whatever, if we try to say his nickname in the middle like we normally do, is a judo black belt who also competed internationally in Sambo. My thesis here is that he has the defensive grappling, or at least the threat of submissions, that Elliott can't just work him over from the top and kind of ride out that decision, which then means we'll have a striking match between 2 guys. Ko is kind of like, and I don't love to stereotype here, but like almost every Korean fighter we see who just loves to brawl. They all have fairly good power, usually pretty decent chins, but like just no interest in defense. And Oban Elliott is fairly hittable. He got knocked down by Val Woodburn, of all people. So basically that means if this one becomes a pure striking match, we're kind of just flipping coins on the feet. One of those coins lands at almost plus 400. I got it at plus 400 earlier in the week, but the market has moved with me a little bit. So that is the thesis here. There's obviously the risk that Oban can still wrestle him because, like, you know, wrestling, it's like a rock, paper, scissors thing with judo and jiu-jitsu sometimes. But if it stays standing, it's just two guys swinging real hard, and we'll see who falls first. And I like it in plus 400 on one of those sides.
Yeah, I'll probably end up sprinkling Co along with you. That fight is basically pick him to go to decision as well, which I found kind of interesting. I think that one probably ends up finishing inside the distance, just given the pace. Elliott is pretty durable, but given the pace, it seems likely that that one does end by finish. Muhammad Naimov minus 250 against Bogdan Grad at plus 225. I think we may get a better live number on Grad, but both of us are interested in him pre-fight. I projected his money line at plus 190, and I make the goes to decision prop about minus 120. You can bet plus money, plus 108 on the GTD prop. This might be a very high-paced fight as well, though. But if it does extend, if it does go all 15 minutes, I think Grad to win by decision could be a good value bet. Grad live is probably the best angle. Grad round 3 is the interesting sprinkle at 15-1. Just because of the cardio dynamic, I do view him as the guy with the better cardio in this matchup. Naimov can grapple a little bit, but that tends to tire him out. That said, Grad was losing his fight to Lucas Alexander before Alexander faded. There was a bad weight cut for Alexander, but also some like pain fume stuff in the locker room that got some guys complained about that ended up hurting their gas tanks that night. Regardless, the cardio dynamic of this matchup, I think favors Grad. And one other piece, Naimov is a cheater. The dude fouls in every fight, and it's really just up to the ref whether to take a point away from him or not. In this area of the world, probably going to be a little bit more lenient with him. He's probably the A side of this matchup. That said, the potential that your moneyline bet gets saved getting beat 2-1 because Naimov committed a foul, which he does in every single fight, grabbing the cage, hitting dudes low. I just think there's a lot of pass to Grad at least pushing this fight, if not winning outright. But again, you may get a better number live after the first round, given the cardio dynamic between these two. So you like Grad pre-fight as well, Billy? Any other prop angles for you on this fight? And then I would assume also a live entry after round 1.
Yeah, Grad is a guy I got to write up a couple times on the Contender Series because he appeared twice. He got knocked out by Tom Nolan. What I said going into that one is that Grad likes to brawl and throw hands on the feet, but he's at his best when he's wrestling and getting takedowns. Kind of didn't get the chance to find out if he was going to shoot on Tom Nolan because he got dropped twice in the first minute and a half. But then in his return, 3 takedowns against Michael Aswell, wins a decision. 3 takedowns against Lucas Alexander, finishes him on the ground. It kind of seems like Grad knows where his bread is buttered here. Naimov can grapple a little bit offensively, but he's a Taekwondo guy by trade. Super tall stance, likes to spin, kick a lot. Just makes it very easy for opponents to take him down. And he gets stuck down there a little bit. We saw it against Colin Anglin on the Contender Series, and the reason you don't remember Colin Anglin's name is because he didn't do anything in the UFC, but he did beat Naimov on the Contender Series. A few other guys took him down a bunch of times, so I like those grappling dynamics. The prop I'm most interested in would be Grad on the point spread at plus 3.5. That's even money, which, is a somewhat big price adjustment because he's plus 230 on the money line now at certain books. But, what are the odds he can't even win one round with a takedown here and there? And Grad is fairly durable outside of the Tom Nolan knockout. I would probably go that way, but just the money line is so juicy at this point, I don't see any reason to get too cute.
You could go yard all season long with Underdogs Pick'em Game. Underdog is one of the leading sports apps and can play now in your state. Millions of fans have already won billions making picks on Underdog. Will you be next? To play, all you have to do is download the app and choose whether a player will go higher or lower on one of their stats. You can choose from things like home runs, strikeouts, total bases, and so much more. Once your picks feel good, you can play with as little as $1. If you get everything right, you can win up to 1,000 times your money. And since we're talking UFC today, Billy, what are you cooking up on Underdog for hires and lowers this weekend?
Yeah, fight we just talked about, an angle we just talked about between Oban, Elliott, and Siakianko. I like Elliott to stay lower than 2.5 takedowns here. What I just talked about, not only can Ko grapple, but I think his submissions will be somewhat of a deterrent at the very least. And then I'm going to throw that in there with Siakianko higher than 32.5 significant strikes. Fairly active striker. Oban Elliott is fairly hittable. And if this fight stays on the feet, there's just plenty of opportunity for those strikes to land. So we can mix those two together. There's a few angles I like on Ko, but I really like the Elliott lower than 2.5 takedowns. If you want to join me on that, download the Underdog app and sign up with promo code Action Network to unlock a special offer of up to $1,000 in bonus cash when you make your first deposit. That's promo code Action Network. Must be 18 plus, 19 plus in Alabama and Nebraska, 19 plus in Colorado for some games, 21 plus in Massachusetts and Arizona, and present in a state where Underdog Fantasy operates. Terms apply, void in Colorado. Concerned with your play? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit ncpgambling.org. In Arizona, call 1-800-NEXT-STEP or text NEXT STEP to 53342. And in New York, call the 24/7 Hope line at 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY.
Let's move on to fights we want to discuss from a prop perspective this weekend. We will end up touching on all 12 fights throughout the show. Nazim Sadikov minus 420 against Nicholas Mata at plus 360. Mata's won consecutive fights as a big underdog. He KO'd Tom Nolan as a plus 310 underdog, and he beat Mata's shot by decision at plus 200. And Nazim Sadikov has been a live underdog in several of his fights. He was taken down and controlled by Terrence McKinney for round 1. He was losing the Bonfim and the Evan Elder fights. He lost rounds 1 and 3 to Slavaclaus. He 10-8'd him in round 2. So overall, seeing a big juicy number on Nazim is not particularly appealing, especially when Mata has pulled some recent upsets. But you do like Nazim to finish this fight inside the distance, and taking a discount at minus 170 compared to that money line north of minus 400. I like Nazim live on the money line after round 1. No pre-fight bet for me here. But how did you end up landing on Nazim inside the distance? And then any round props in particular, do you like him to finish this early, or do you think he finishes it later in terms of cardio advantage?
Yeah, I mean, as to how I landed on it, Nicholas Mata either finishes you or gets finished. I mean, the vast majority of the time has never lost a decision. So he's been finished 5 times, knocked out 4, which is pretty concerning. And then his no contest against Trey Ogden, he actually got submitted in that fight. Like, he was seconds away from being tapped. That should have been a loss. Still feel bad for Trey Ogden for that one, because if had the ref just waited a few seconds to jump in, that would be another win for Ogden. And Sadikov, as you pointed out, good power, can 10-8 some people. He's got most of his wins by finish. He has won just one decision. So when you put those two things together, basically his money line and finish props should be much closer. If it does go to a decision, I actually do worry for Sadikov, but the finish only prop is just ridiculous. Like, you're not laying the massive juice on that, even though it might get refunded. So with all that said, that leads me to his inside the distance of minus 170. Not a great line, but wanted to touch on that fight a little bit. And I think it would probably be, it feels like an early second to me. Like, Mata has his moments early. Sadikov, kind of gathers his bearings and comes back out. You see him finish a lot of people. Well, I guess one was a doctor stoppage at the end of the first round, which would, I never know if those are going to score as a first round win or a second round win when they stop it between the rounds. Like, you can make a case for both of them. But something like that is how I'm looking to it. And yeah, that's all I got on that one. I know you've got a bunch of fights you expect to not end inside the distance on this card.
And Sadikov round 2 is plus 410. Round 3 is plus 700. Not super appealing prices, but maybe worth a small sprinkle there. Definitely live after round 1 is where I'd look, given how his fights have played out. And I think Mata could be competitive for 5 minutes if he doesn't get knocked out. Yeah, to your point, a bunch of fights I do like to go all 15 minutes this week in the big cage over in Azerbaijan. Let's just run down the list. So Ismail Nardiev against Young Park. This fight I projected closer to minus 150 to go to a decision. It is currently minus 132. Bit small, both of these guys, for the middleweight division. I'd say more welterweight size middleweights. At Park, 50% of his UFC fights have gone to decision. Generally, I do not view him as a big power puncher, and I don't think he's a big submission threat unless his opponents tire out and he's able to take the back. And I do think that is a potential possibility here in the late stages of this fight with Nardiev, because Nardiev is solid, but he does slow down later in the fights. This is his second stint in the UFC, though. 5 of his 9 career decisions across 31 bouts have come in the UFC. All of his UFC fights have gone to decision. I think this is either a Park round 3 finish or fight GTD. So I might play both. I might play Park round 3 as a hedge, but the GTD prop minus 132, as I said, I projected that closer to minus 150. You could probably lay that up to minus 135, minus 140. Daria Zheleshnikova against Melissa Mullins. These two have fought previously, and the fight did end inside the distance. But comparing it to the bantamweight average, the women's bantamweight average, about 61%. I projected this at 54%, and they're giving you plus 120, which is 45%. So nearly a 16% difference compared to the women's bantamweight average. Pretty binary striker versus grappler matchup. I would not bet this one too aggressively, but if we can keep this one standing, I think it goes all 15 minutes, or potentially Zaleshnikova has solidified her bottom game and does not get finished on the ground as quickly this time. Of the two women's fights, though, I think Alexieva against Claudia Segula is the better bet. Billy likes this one as well. Again, same women's bantamweight divisional average of 61%. I projected this one above the average, though. I make this one 64% to go to decision and minus 180. The market is giving you minus 125 at 55% implied. So about 6% below the divisional average, 9% below my projection. Seems binary on paper. Do have to bet into the numbers, though, given the weight class. Minus 125, I think you could lay that up to about minus 140. And then lastly, Tagir Ulanbekov against Azat Maxim at flyweight. I feel like Tagir has generally kind of gone from overrated to underrated in the UFC. He only has one loss, came against Tim Elliott. He's been in some other competitive decisions, but he has a win over Alan Nascimento that has aged really well. He just is so reliable to get the takedowns. I mean, he's from the Eagle MMA team, the original team with Khabib and Islam. Like, he's extremely well trained, does not have the best gas tank necessarily, but that's because he's big for the division and has trouble cutting to make the weight. So I actually think he might be the better striker of these two. Maxim is also taking this fight on very short notice in place of Kyoji Horiguchi. Like, talk about a big step down in competition from facing Horiguchi to facing Azat Maxim. So I do think Tagir wins this one, but wins it by decision. I think Maxim survives on bottom. I make Tagir's decision line about minus 125. Would bet that up to minus 120. Billy, I think you might have thoughts on the Alexieva fight, and potentially the Ulanbekov fight as well. But any of the four fights that I just broke down, if you have betting thoughts on any of them, feel free to give them out.
Yeah, I love the Segula Alexieva goes to decision. It's just neither of them are really dynamic enough to threaten the other one too much, if that makes sense. Especially, I think the only reason we're getting this good of a price is because Alexieva has a submission win over Stephanie Egger, but she was like a million years old and retired shortly after that and was on a very long losing streak. So you kind of throw that one out. And then speaking of fights that you kind of should probably just throw out when you're handicapping, that is anyone against Tim Elliott. Like, there's just, you can't draw any conclusions about how someone fights based on their performance, good or bad, against Tim Elliott, because Tim Elliott just does the weirdest stuff. It's not something you're going to see from anyone else. Like, that should just be a blanket rule. Like, when you look at a fighter's record, if they have Tim Elliott on there, just pretend it didn't happen and handicap how you would had that not been the case. So I think you're right about the market's view on Tagir, but I think that's wise because he lost to Elliott. But Elliott, it's almost like the little version of Michael Johnson, where he can beat the best guys, lose to the worst guys. It probably doesn't mean anything. Just don't let it adjust your priors too much because it doesn't mean anything.
Let's go to our best bets. One fight that we both have a bet on, but Billy's best bet is going to come here. This is more of a prop lean for me. Tofik Musayev against Miktabek Orolbai. This was a lightweight bout, but they moved it up to a catchweight of 165 pounds on Friday. I believe Orolbai had trouble making the weight. He has had trouble making it in the past. He weighed in at 165 and Tofik weighed in at 163. So I would imagine, considering Orolbai weighed in a bit heavier, right at the 165-pound limit, imagine he was the one who was struggling to make the weight. But I do view him as the guy with better cardio and more tenacity over the final two rounds in this fight. I think he's a good live entry after the first round. I think Tofik will be dangerous early. This is a guy who's well-trained, fought in Rizin, fought in Bellator, but more importantly, he is the local fighter. He is from Azerbaijan, and I do worry if we get a close and competitive decision that it will lean to Tofik. So you are taking Orolbai in the money line, which means I think you feel like he can finish the fight in potentially the second or third rounds. 5-inch reach advantage. He's incredibly durable. We both bet Mateusz Rembeczki against him, so now you're running it back with Orolbai as a favorite. And do you like his live angle as well?
Yeah, I do like the live angle. It's not necessarily that I think Orolbai get the finish. It's just that rounds Orolbai wins are going to be extremely clear that he won. That, like, unless you filled out your scorecard before the fight started, which is entirely possible here, but unless that's the case, I don't think we're going to have too much controversy. Musayev is the better striker, fairly clean striker. I know people, hear the kind of Slavic-sounding last name and assume grappler, but he has a striking background. I don't know if this is still accurate, but according to his Wikipedia, he's a blue belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. you would like to think maybe he at least got a purple since the time that was written, but nowhere near the level of grappling as Orolbai, who is competitive in the grappling with Mateusz Rambeski, who's like, ADCC qualifier and all that good stuff. I think Musayev needs a knockout here, or he's just going to get taken down and controlled on the ground in rounds that look pretty clear. And it's not clear that it's actually possible to knock out Muktabek Orolbai because he took so much damage from Rebecki. At the end of the first round, his eye was totally shut.
Yeah,
I don't know how
he orbital bone for sure after the first round. Like that eye was broken, and he's so tough. He just kept fighting through it. He's incredible.
Yeah. And like won a round after that, not just like sort of limp to the bell. Like continued to win after that. The most amazing part of that performance is that the doctor came in and covered his good eye, and he correctly guessed the number of fingers the doctor was holding up because there's no way he could actually see out of that one at the time. All of which is actually playing to your goes to decision line here, I understand. So, yeah, I just think, when Musayev has struggled in other organizations, it has been against grappling or grapplers, submitted fairly recently. That is a weakness for him. And he's also a 35-year-old coming over to the UFC. Hasn't been great for guys making their UFC debut from other organizations lately. Like Pitbull lost, Patchy Mix looked terrible, Kai Asakura didn't look great against Pantoja. Like, we're kind of seeing that these levels do exist for a reason, especially when these guys are coming over past their prime. And the other interesting thing from Musayev, he hasn't fought in almost 2 years. So, 35-year-old, almost 2 years out of action, and stepping up to a new promotion. Probably only got signed because he's the highest level fighter from the country that the UFC is going to for the first time. Those don't necessarily mean anything, but they're all concerning signs.
Yeah, as you mentioned, I lean to goes to decision. I make that minus money. You can get plus 135 on that prop. Divisional average is about 46%, and plus 118. You're getting plus 135 here. So a little bit of an edge relative to the divisional norm, and then also Orolbai by decision of plus 260. I make that closer to plus 190, but I think the live angle on this fight, my favorite way to bet it. I think Tafik will be competitive for a round, and then Orolbai will take over late. Final fight on the card that we're going to talk about is the first fight on the card. That's Hamdi Abdelwahab, minus 170 against Muhammad Usman at plus 142. This fight is minus 200 to go to a decision in the heavyweight division with a divisional average closer to about a 52% finish rate. Plus 160, a very juicy, interesting number to bet between these heavyweights. That said, Hamdi is not much of a finisher, and Usman, while he carries power, really needs to crack you hard in order to put you away. Hamdi's won 2 splits, though. He certainly did not deserve the split over Jamal Pogues. 18 of the 13 media members, and 77% of fans scored that bout for Pogues. The Dontel Mays split, he probably did deserve. Just one media member scored that for Mays, and 17% of fans scored it for Mays. But Usman has a big 7-inch reach advantage here. He can wrestle, and he hits harder and with more impact between these two. He was also able to scramble back from takedowns against Thomas Pedersen. Hamdi hasn't shown the ability to consistently hold guys down. I know he did get Mays down for a little bit, but I don't think his wrestling, he's an Olympic level wrestler, but I don't think his MMA cage wrestling is quite as functional, and I don't think his game is super coherent for this sport. So I just prefer Muhammad Usman's power. I prefer the impact of his strikes when these two are at range, and I think he has enough defensive wrestling to keep this fight standing. I make his decision prop about plus 253. You could bet Usman by decision of plus 350, and then Usman on the money line, I make him closer to plus 120, would take him down to about plus 130. Billy, I know you said you'd rather this fight not exist, but if you had to bet it, I'd imagine you're taking Usman on the money line. Probably not betting it at all, though. And then just any other thoughts on any other of the fights that we discussed on this card before we get out of here?
Yeah, I think you've probably talked me into Usman. You sparked something in me because you mentioned that Hamdi is an Olympic level wrestler. He's an Olympic level Greco-Roman wrestler, which we've talked about a couple times in the last few weeks. You need the clinch to make that work. In Greco, they don't shoot. And also there's not a lot of emphasis placed on holding guys down in Greco compared to like American folk style wrestling, which lines up perfectly with what you said. Other thought I have on this one, we hit the no Cody parlay last week at decent money with all three Codys losing. If you wanted to do you could do, I don't see either side of this one, but the drug test failure parlay, you could go Usman and Blades to both defeat guys who have popped for steroids in the UFC, or alternatively, if you think USADA doesn't matter anymore, Then you go Hamdi and Kuniev and just say they're letting him take whatever now. Hamdi certainly looks like he didn't come off any of the things he tested for. Kuniev, you can kind of see it, that maybe he let go of some of his past vices. But yeah, so if you need something silly, those are the two angles. Either side of it, really. I mean, they both make an equal amount of sense. But yeah, I do like Usman.
That'll do it for UFC betting preview for this week. You could find more UFC betting content for both Billy and myself on actionnetwork.com. And if you'd like to instantly tell some of the bets that we discussed on today's show, you could look for the quick links both in the podcast and the video description, or visit actionnetwork.com/bet now. Don't forget to download the free award-winning Action Network app and sign up for Action Pro for immediate access to expert picks and analysis. Remember, early start time for this card, 12 p.m. Eastern, so get those bets in early. Best of luck with all your bets this weekend. Enjoy the violence. Thank you for listening. See you next time.